My name is Elowen Pierce. I live in Ashland, Oregon, a quiet little town nestled between forests and forgotten highways. I'm 39, a midwife by training, a mother of 2 boys, and until recently, someone who believed in God mostly out of habit. I don't quite know how to start this. I've told this story only a handful of times, and every time I do, I feel that same tremble rise up in my chest, the mixture of awe, fear, and deep, unshakable love. If you're hearing this, it's not by accident. Everything changed on a rainy Thursday last March. It was early, just before 6 a.m. I was heading to a birth on the outskirts of town, an old farmhouse where a young couple was having their first baby. I'd done hundreds of births, but I remember that one clearly because, well, I never made it there. The rain had been coming down all night. Visibility was low. I had worship music playing low in the background, an old vineyard song, the kind I hadn't listened to in years. I remember whispering a prayer, barely even thinking about it. God, if you're really still with me, I need to know. I turned onto Route 99, a winding stretch of 2-lane road that hugs the base of the hills, and then it happened. A deer shot across the road. I swerved. My tires skidded. I remember the sickening sound of metal on metal, glass exploding inward like rain, and then nothing. They told me later the driver who hit me was a man in his 60s, half blind with fatigue and driving without headlights. He T-boned my Subaru at 55 miles per hour. My car was crushed. My chest collapsed. My heart stopped for 11 minutes and 42 seconds. But I wasn't gone. I was somewhere else. One moment I was in my car, the steering wheel crushed into my ribs, my lungs gasping for breath that wouldn't come. And the next, I was floating above the wreckage. I saw everything. My own body twisted in the driver's seat, slumped, lifeless. The crushed frame of my Subaru crumpled like paper. Rain falling in slow motion. Steam rising from the engine like a spirit leaving flesh. I remember thinking, am I dead? But I didn't feel dead. I felt detached, light, and strangely, beautifully calm. Paramedics were yelling. Someone cut my seatbelt with shears. A woman with freckles and red hair started chest compressions on me, her lips trembling. I could hear her thoughts. God, please don't let her die. Please, she's so young. And then I looked to my right and saw my mother. Not her physical body, she passed away when I was 19. But she was standing there, radiant, whole, smiling like she'd been waiting for me. Behind her were trees, but not like trees I've ever seen. They shimmered as if woven from light and sound. Come, Elowen, she said gently. I hesitated. Something in me pulled both ways, toward the warm presence she radiated and toward the woman pounding her fists into my chest, shouting, "Come back, don't you dare give up." And then I felt it. A pulling, not physical but something deeper. My soul, my spirit being drawn upward. Not dragged. Invited. Like being caught in the current of a love so vast it had weight. I looked back one last time at my broken body below. And then I moved. Forward. Faster than thought. Through a kind of tunnel, but it wasn't dark. It was woven of light. Light that felt alive. Intelligent. Aware of me. Colors were impossible to describe, like gold had learned how to sing. I felt warmth without heat, clarity without effort. There were no shadows. Only presence. Only peace. I didn't see Jesus yet, but I felt him, as if he was waiting just ahead. And I knew something sacred was about to be revealed. I came out of the tunnel into something I still struggle to describe. It wasn't a place the way we think of places here. It was more like stepping into the center of everything, time, love, truth, wrapped in light that pulsed like music. I could see in every direction without turning. The air, or whatever it was, moved with a kind of intelligence. Every molecule felt alive, like it was worshipping. There were colors that don't exist on Earth. Vibrations of gold, lavender, and silver that didn't just shine, they spoke. But all of that disappeared the moment I saw him. Jesus. He wasn't walking toward me. He simply was in front of me all at once. I can't tell you how I knew it was him. I just did. My soul recognized him before my mind could catch up. His presence hit me like a tide of love I didn't know could exist. He wasn't glowing like a cartoon. He didn't look like a Sunday school poster. He looked like glory wrapped in gentleness. Like every heartbreak I'd ever had was instantly known and already mended just by his gaze. His eyes, they weren't just looking at me. They were reading me. All at once I felt everything, my failures, my shame, the things I never told anyone, being exposed and washed away simultaneously. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me like I was his favorite part of creation. And I began to weep, not out of guilt, but because I had never been so fully known and fully loved at the same time. Then he spoke, not with his mouth, with his presence. "Elowen," he said. "I've been waiting for this moment." My knees gave way, though I wasn't sure I even had a body anymore. I collapsed or floated down, I'm not sure which, before him. He didn't pull me up. He sat with me. Like a friend. Like a father. Like a king who didn't mind the dust on his robe if it meant being close to his child. "Why am I here?" I asked, not with words but from the deepest part of my spirit. His reply echoed through every layer of my being. "Because you asked. And because you're ready to see." Then he stood and held out his hand. When I took it, I felt strength surge through me, not like power but like belonging. He looked into the distance, though there was no horizon, and said, "There is something I want to show you. Something my church has forgotten. Come." And without walking, we moved. Faster than light, deeper than breath, toward a place where something ancient waited to be rediscovered. As we moved, the space around us shifted, not like entering a new room, but as if layers were being peeled back, revealing what was always there but hidden. We came to a kind of overlook, a vast, open expanse that stretched infinitely in every direction. And from that height I saw them. Threads of golden light, rising from the earth like beams from souls. Thousands of them. Millions. Some were thin and faint, flickering like candlelight. Others pulsed brightly, strong, steady, brilliant. They weren't random, they reached upward like prayers with weight. And I could somehow feel what they were connected to. Each thread came from a person on earth who was fasting and praying. Some were in tiny apartments. Some were in prison cells. Some were walking city streets. Others were in fields, offices, cars. "What are these?" I asked, breathless. Jesus stood beside me, watching. "These," he said, "are the lives of my children choosing to seek me with sacrifice." He extended his hand toward one particularly radiant thread. It shimmered like it was made of woven flame. "That's Malik," he said. "He's in Detroit. Day 5 of a water fast. Praying for his daughter to come home." And then another one pulsed with a gentle rhythm. "That's Maria," he whispered. "She's fasting from bitterness and pride. Her heart is healing." I couldn't stop staring. Some threads looked almost invisible, so thin they could snap. Others danced and burned with power that felt like thunder held back. "Why are some brighter than others?" I asked. "Because it's not about how long they fast," Jesus said, turning toward me. "It's about the posture of their hearts." I watched as one thread flickered, then dimmed and went out. "What happened?" I asked, stunned. "Distraction," he answered gently. "Fear. Doubt." The world pulled her attention away before the breakthrough came. Then, to my surprise, he showed me my own thread. I didn't even know I had one. It was from 2 years ago. A short fast I had done, half-heartedly, because a friend had asked me to join her. I watched as the thread formed, then barely glowed and faded. "That one?" I asked quietly. It didn't do much, did it? It did more than you knew, he said. Even small obedience creates impact. But I want to show you what happens when someone fasts with their whole heart. Suddenly, the entire spiritual landscape shifted. Above us, across the sky of eternity, I saw massive storms of light begin to swirl, each one formed by the convergence of many threads, all fasting, all aligned. Communities, churches, families. As these threads joined together, the atmosphere shook. I saw chains break off people, spiritual oppression scatter like smoke, and dark clouds evaporate under the weight of glory. When my people fast together, Jesus said, it creates momentum in the spiritual realm, force that no darkness can withstand. Then he looked at me, serious yet tender. But not all fasting carries weight. And with that, we began to descend deeper, towards something he called the halls of time. What I saw there would change everything I believed about prayer, history, and the battles yet to come. We descended, not down as in lower, but inward, deeper into eternity. And then we entered what Jesus called the halls of time. It wasn't a hallway. It was more like a living archive, time made visible. Moments from history hovered around us like living paintings, unfolding in every direction. But they weren't just scenes. They were real. I saw Moses on Mount Sinai, his body trembling, lips cracked from hunger, eyes blazing as he received the 10 Commandments. But now I could see what was happening in the spiritual realm behind him. As Moses fasted, it was like his spirit expanded, making room for God's glory to descend. It hit me. The fast wasn't to earn the tablets. It was to prepare the vessel. Then Jesus took me to Babylon. I saw Daniel, alone, kneeling by a window. The city around him was thick with demonic darkness. But his simple meal, his steady prayers, it was like they punched holes in that darkness. His fasting, Jesus said, weakened the grip of spiritual powers over an entire region. I watched warriors in the unseen realm draw strength from Daniel's obedience. I saw angels move through portals opened by humility and hunger for God. Then I saw scenes from church history, people no one knows. A woman in 1723 fasting in secret for her rebellious son. A small house church in northern India in the 1950s, fasting for revival. Each fast was like striking a match that became a wildfire over time. I saw ripple effects, generations later, missionaries sent, churches planted, lives changed. My people often don't realize, Jesus said softly, that their fasting today shapes battles they'll never see, victories that may not come for years. Then he showed me my own timeline. Moments I had fasted out of desperation, when my marriage was crumbling, when my youngest was sick. I always thought my fasts had failed. But now I saw what they had built, invisible scaffolding in the spirit. Places where I had created space for God's movement, even when I couldn't feel it. You thought nothing happened, Jesus said, because you couldn't see. But I always saw. I began to weep. How many times had I given up too soon? How many breakthroughs had I missed because I didn't know what was actually happening behind the veil? Then he turned toward me, eyes burning, not in anger but urgency. Elowen, the days ahead will require strength that doesn't come from convenience. My church must remember how to fast, not out of duty but from love. The battles coming won't be won through casual prayer alone. He showed me the near future. Church distracted, comfortable, spiritually dull, and a wave of darkness rising, deception, fear, division. But then, like lightning, I saw a remnant. People who were learning to fast again, to seek, to consecrate. And as they did, their words became like swords, their worship like wildfires. They weren't the biggest or loudest, but they were the ones with authority. This is why I brought you here, Jesus said. Because I'm calling my people back to fasting, not as performance but as partnership. And with that we moved again. This time towards something more personal, something I didn't expect. He wanted to show me how fasting wasn't just about intercession. but how it transforms the one who fasts. As we moved again, the space around us narrowed, becoming more intimate, more focused. Gone were the vast skies and golden threads. Now we entered what looked like a room made of light and sound, pulsed with warmth and a kind of sacred stillness. Jesus stood beside me and extended his hand. "Watch," he said. Before us appeared a man, maybe in his late 40s, kneeling in a dimly lit room on earth. I didn't know his name, but I could feel his hunger. He was on the final day of a long fast. His body was weak, but his spirit burned. As he prayed, something began to happen. His spiritual body began to change. It was subtle at first, like a flame that had found new oxygen. But then I saw it clearly. His ears opened wider. His spiritual eyes became sharper. His entire being vibrated with heightened awareness. "When my children fast with pure hearts," Jesus said, "their spiritual senses become attuned to heaven. They begin to hear me more clearly, see more purely, discern more deeply." Then he showed me others, young, old, men, women, each one fasting in secret, in weakness and longing. And as they fasted, something beautiful unfolded. Their spiritual DNA shifted, not physically, but eternally. It was as though new pathways were carved into their spirits, channels for wisdom, discernment, and supernatural love. "Fasting doesn't change who you are to me," Jesus said, "but it changes how much of heaven you're able to carry." Then he showed me something that made my breath catch. These same people, now clothed in armor. Not metal, not Roman. This armor was made of light, truth, worship, and intercession. And it didn't appear before the fast. Formed during. Each day of sincere fasting increases a believer's authority in prayer, he said. It's like heavenly promotion, not earned but stewarded. I watched as one woman, thin, fragile, weary from days of fasting, prayed over her husband. In the spirit, her words were like arrows tipped in fire. They pierced through demonic resistance. They landed with impact. Not because she shouted, but because she was aligned. Then Jesus showed me something sobering. People who were fasting in pride, fasting for recognition, or fasting out of religious habit without surrender. Their spiritual bodies remained unchanged, their threads dim. Fasting with the wrong heart produces little spiritual fruit, he said. But fasting with humility, that moves heaven. He looked at me then, deeper than before. Many of my children try to use fasting to get me to act. But fasting isn't about manipulating heaven. It's about joining me in what I already desire to do. Then, like a wave, I saw marriages being restored, addictions breaking, old lies crumbling, gifts awakening, callings reigniting. All not because people fasted perfectly, but because they fasted with surrender. And then Jesus said something I'll never forget. Elowen, when my people fast with love, heaven sings. I felt it. The fragrance of fasting, like incense, rising from the earth, mixing with the sound of worship in heaven. And then I saw one last scene. My own face. Me, kneeling by my bed 3 years ago, skipping meals and praying half-heartedly for clarity during a hard season. But now, Jesus showed me what I couldn't see then. That even that feeble offering had opened a doorway, one that he had walked through to meet me again and again. None of it was wasted, he said. I began to weep. Not from shame, but from the overwhelming kindness of his love. And now, he said softly, I want to show you why I called you to fast for your brother. Jesus looked into me, through me, as if everything in my life had been building toward this moment. Come, he said. I want to show you what your fasting was fighting for. The scene shifted again. Now I was standing in a darkened place, not oppressive but weighty. Like the air was heavy with unseen conflict. And there, in the center of it, was my brother Nolan. He looked like himself, but also not. There was a weariness on him, a heaviness I hadn't recognized fully in life. Around him were chains, not metal but made of shadow. Some thick, others like webs. They pulsed with familiar names. Addiction, shame, self-hatred, generational trauma, fatherlessness. They wrapped around him like vines choking a tree, and he didn't even seem to notice. I cried out, "Jesus, this is how he's been all these years?" He nodded slowly. "This is the spiritual reality behind what you've seen. And what you haven't." I could barely breathe. Then Jesus showed me myself. Fasting. Times I had prayed with trembling hands, begged for breakthrough, whispered my brother's name over and over when words failed me. I saw each day of fasting as a strike against those chains. The first fast? Crack. The second? A splinter. The third, when I nearly gave up. A fracture. Every time you fasted for Nolan, Jesus said, you were partnering with my intercession. Then he lifted his hand. The image shifted again. Now I saw him, Jesus, kneeling beside my brother. Not pleading. Not panicked. Interceding. Constantly. Powerfully. Lovingly. "You weren't fasting alone," he said. "You were joining me." And then it happened. A moment I'll never forget. The chain labeled addiction shattered. Didn't explode. It simply broke, like it had lost the right to hold him anymore. A light surged into my brother's spirit, and I saw him lift his head for the first time in years. He looked around, confused but free. Jesus turned to me and smiled. "That's what your fast accomplished." I dropped to my knees, overcome. "I didn't even do it well," I whispered. "I was tired. I was doubting half the time." He knelt beside me. "But you didn't quit. That's what matters." He paused, then said something that struck me like thunder and like a lullaby at the same time. "When you fasted, you created a space for me to move." And then he showed me something even more beautiful. All across the earth, believers fasting for people they loved, parents, siblings, friends. Chains breaking. Souls lifting. Not all at once. Not always visibly. But it was working. Even when it didn't look like it. "When my children fast in love," Jesus said. "They wage war in the spirit, and I never let their sacrifice return void." I wept. Not just for my brother, but for all the times I'd almost given up. Now I understood. The assignment hadn't been about controlling the outcome. It was about partnering with God's heart. "This is why I brought you here, Elowen," Jesus said. "Because your testimony will awaken others. Many are weary. Many think their fasting has failed. But I want them to see what you've seen." Then he lifted my chin. "And now I want to show you what happens next, what your obedience has already set in motion." Jesus stood before me with that same gaze, piercing yet tender, like he was holding the weight of my soul without judgment. "It's time," he said. I didn't want to go. I had never felt so whole, so known, so truly alive. But I understood. I hadn't been brought here to escape. I'd been brought here to be entrusted. He lifted his hand, and once again I saw earth. But now it was glowing with streams of light. Each stream traced back to someone who had heard a call and responded. To fast, to pray, to seek, to surrender. Many of them had been sparked by testimonies. Testimonies like mine. "This," he said, "is the fruit already growing from your obedience." I watched in awe. I saw families restored. Young adults choosing purity. Entire churches calling their people to fasting, not out of religious pressure but out of hunger for God's presence. I saw high school students skipping meals between classes to pray for revival. I saw elderly women praying in hospital beds surrounded by angels. I saw men on construction sites fasting in secret, holding heaven open over their neighborhoods. And I saw Jesus in the center of it all, joyful, engaged, overflowing with delight. When my people fast with hearts aligned to mine, he said, it creates bridges for my power to move, not just in their lives but across cities, nations, generations. He looked at me one last time. Felt like eternity in a single glance. Tell them, he said, not to earn my love, they already have it, but to partner with my heart in this crucial hour. Then everything began to dissolve, the light, the music, the presence. But before it did, he gave me one final message. The days ahead will require my people to walk in levels of spiritual authority they've never known before. Fasting is not optional. It is essential preparation for what is coming. The next moment, I gasped. Pain surged through my body. Bright lights. Beeping monitors. Voices. I was back in the hospital. Alive. No brain damage. No broken spine. No internal bleeding. The doctors called it unexplainable. But I knew exactly what had happened. And just like that, everything changed. That was 9 months ago. Since then, I've shared my story wherever I've been allowed. In churches, online, in quiet coffee shop conversations with people too weary to believe for breakthrough anymore. And I've fasted again. This time not in desperation, but in partnership. Nolan? He's been clean for 6 months. He still doesn't know the full story. But one day he will. And you, yes, you reading this or hearing it, you're not here by chance. You're being invited into something deeper. Not into striving. Not into religion. But into a sacred alignment with heaven. The question is no longer, does fasting work? The question is, will we respond when Jesus calls? He is calling his church again, and not to earn his power, but to be trusted with it. The days of passive faith are over. The days of radical obedience have begun. Time is now. Jesus is waiting. How will we answer?